brothers. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
I promise I won't mean like this during the round.
You are fine.
Okay. Do you want to set up a speech talk or what?
Yeah, sure. I've never done it before.
Here, I'll help you out.
So
Just a second. I'll set it up and then I'll give you the code. How's that?
yeah, that's probably best.
This is my code, correct?
Yeah.
Cool. Can I put this outside of the frame?
Yeah, that's fine. Wait, are you gonna debate from there and onto the table?
I'm probably going to debate from the table. I'm just setting this here in a second.
Can you debate from there?
Yes, I will. Thanks, Justin. Exposing my ugliness to the world. That's really considerate.
You're not ugly.
Okay. NF, I can't read. P R. So it's here. Hold on, let me help you. So you're gonna go to speechdrop.net.
Oh yeah, no, I have it open. I've just never made a room
Here,
before.
it's okay. I've made it. It's okay. Okay, so the code is capital N. Here, that's what it is. It's like right here.
NFPH.
Cool, cool.
Oh, no. NFPHPR.
NFPH. No, it's not showing. It's checking. So wait a second. It should take a minute. If not, try opening up another tab, retyping in it, because sometimes when you go back, it kind of hurts it. Ah, here.
That would be it.
Let me help you out. If you want to use my edge room,
I think.
it should work if you're from Chico, right?
Yeah,
cool.
no, it will. Yeah, it worked.
Okay.
So NFPHPR.
Locate. Yes.
Ah, here we are. Hornet round 4. Okay.
Okay, go.
Just so I know ahead of time, are you cool with your opportunity for this year?
Could I get some? I have a couple questions about the judges' preferences. Are you willing to vote on a stock issue?
Good question.
Yes. No? Okay. Thank you. So you prefer like
Actually, alright, listen. Yes, but don't just tell me because it's a stock issue I'm gonna vote on it. Like, I have arguments as to why I should be voting on stock issues.
that makes sense. I respect that. What about so you in terms of like general neg stuff, you prefer like voting on impact calc and whatnot, I'm guessing, yeah?
For sure.
Net negatives. Okay. And then how do you feel about K's? And K literature. How familiar are you?
A little bit.
Okay.
A little bit, yeah.
So policy?
Fine, you can run space.
Okay.
Okay,
It's like,
and then
yay,
with speed, I'm not very fast, so if I call speed, I won't be running anything like too fast.
You're fine.
Okay, I don't speak really fast, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
just for my opponent to know, like I low key, high key, like don't, I don't really like keep up with speed that well, just because I have a little bit of a gap.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not really. I'm a congressional debater at heart, in case you can't tell by my hand motions. So yeah, if I ask you to slow down, Is it cool with you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not trying to interrupt my opponent.
I will. Yeah.
Cool.
I'll
Thank
try to
you.
be as clear as possible.
It's all good. As long as it's textual, for the most part, I don't have a problem with it. 'Cause
Okay.
Who cares?
It's all on the dock too.
Okay, and if it's like analytics that are off the dock,
No.
I ask that
analytics
you
off
just
the
kind
dock.
of slow down.
Okay.
Cool.
But for the 1AC, it's all on the dock.
Okay, for the like the 1AR and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
So, thank you so much.
No problem. Let me know when everyone has it up, or if you have any troubles getting it. So Christian's been watching all of the rounds?
Oh my god.
Hi, Christian. Okay.
Is that a pun? Oh my god. That's a pun.
A pun? Well, Christian made this.
Is that? Oh my god.
Well, I mean, like, anything you think is
Alright, let's
maybe.
get
Okay,
the
let's
debate
just
on.
start.
Oh, yeah, right, that.
Cool.
Okay.
That's probably
Little
that.
debating part. Okay. Is anybody not ready? No? Okay. Starting with inherency. There is nothing in place to fight the ultra-right Cooper 2018. There is something especially upsetting about politically motivated violence, and there's nothing wrong with dedicating special attention to stopping it. Of course, this is basically zero reason to think that Trump administration will do this. In mid-2017, the Department of Homeland Security canceled a planned $400,000 grant to Life After Hate. President Trump has been notably reluctant to condemn right-wing extremists. He infamously defended the white supremacists who organized the Charlottesville rally. B plan, the United States federal government should direct U.S. Cybercom to conduct offensive cyber operations against ultra-right extremist communication networks, including recruitment and internal communication. I reserve the right to clarify and cross-examination. Next, solvency. Denying ultra-right extremists access to the internet is effective key in 2018. The primary lesson of these struggles is that denying them that form outright may be more effective. Attention has shifted to removing terrorist content from social media platforms rather than seeking merely to debunk or discredit it. Germany and France, for example, have long criminalized Holocaust denial. European governments have also prohibited against hate speech or incitement to criminalize speech that maligns or recent immigrants or religious or ethnic minorities. Next, advantage one, they will Nazi hate. A, uniqueness. Ultra-right extremists use online harassment to silence opposition. Lee 2017. Message boards used by neo-Nazis show a concerted effort to compile private information of leftist enemies and circulate the data to encourage harassment or violence. The primary activity of the Pony Power server is posting private information like names, phone addresses, and phone numbers of dozens of anti-fascist activists. Victims described terror and have variously turned to friends and family for support and locked down their accounts. Doxing is just the latest in a series of online efforts by neo-Nazis that marginalize their opponents. Doxing efforts have forced targets to leave their homes in the face of death threats, rape threats, and other forms of harassment. 2. The ultra-right murders people. Hanks and Men 2018. There have been at least 13 alt-right related fatal episodes, leaving 43 dead and more than 60 injured. 9 of the incidents occurred in 2017 alone, making last year the most violent year for the movement. Accessibility makes it easier for gradual indoctrination, particularly on social media platforms where tech companies have long ignored the warning signs that their platforms were contributing to the radicalization of far-right extremists. That so much violence has taken on the shades of a specific subculture like the alt-right quickly shows just how critical these wide open platforms have been to the growth of the movement. The violence that left one dead at the Unite the Right rally last summer should not be understood as the high watermark for the movement. The alt-right is redoubling its efforts at youth recruitment and intensifying its rhetoric and calling for radical individual action. B link, disrupting extremist communication and recruitment network works. Lamont 2017, the U.S. military conducted cyber attacks against the Islamic State for more than a year. The offensive against ISIS focused on destroying or disrupting computer network tasks used by the militant group to rescue fighters and communicate inside the organization. Such offensive weapons were brought into the open in 2016 after Carter President Cyber Command to become more involved in the campaign to defeat the Islamic State. The campaign recently received the full-throated endorsement of the head of U.S. Special Operations Command. Cyber Command produced an operation which provided devastating effects on the adversary when combined with traditional operations. The strikes culminated in the destruction of the adversary on an epic scale. See internal link. Internet is key to neo-Nazi movement. CRS 2017. White supremacist war among the very early users of the internet. To them, the virtual realm is an important anecdote. In them, they can meet, articulate, and support their views. A 2016 study found that Americans espousing white supremacist ideals on Twitter outnumber the supporters of ISIS by many measures. On Twitter, American white nationalist movements have seen their followers grow by more than 600% since 2012. Today, they outperform ISIS in nearly every social metric that follower counts 2 tweets per day. D-Impact, disrupting the ultra-right prevents radicalization. Bear 2013. Internet has broken down barriers that exist in the physical world for certain groups of people to become involved in extremism. One person formed the extreme right-wing movement, recounts how the internet was the easiest way to make contacts, to take over and coordinate responsibilities. The internet encourages people to more easily see themselves as a part of a broader movement and not just online spectators. Advantage number 2, the fire hose of falsehoods. A, uniqueness. The ultra-right is ripe for offensive information warfare. In 2018. Extreme essentialist and conspirationalist news published in the U.S. was overwhelmingly consumed and shared by right-wing social network users. Trump supporters consumes the largest volume of junk news, and junk news is the largest proportion of news links they share. Their extreme hard-right pages, distinct from Republican pages, share more junk news than all the other audiences put together. B-Link, Cybercom uses information warfare. Federal Times 2017, information warfare is taken into consideration in U.S. cyber training operations. When you start talking about social media and fake news, it gets to the key to cyberspace superiority. Information attacks may arrive in combination with traditional cyber attacks. See internal link, proactive disinformation in a violent ultra-right circles show confusion and discontent. Jackson 2018, used proactively, disinformation provides much greater potential to move audiences to action, shape or confuse public understanding, and influence political events. Proactive disinformation campaigns can achieve real-world impact by influencing the action of its consumers. D-Impacts, disinformation can alter the ultra-right's thinking. Jackson 2018, disinformation can also be used to alter the broader information space in which people direct issues from beliefs and make political decisions. The velocity and volume of disinformation results in a cycle of declining trust in sources of information. Consumers do not necessarily need to be persuaded by the introduction of doubt or anxiety. May be enough to inspire disengagement. To producing disinformation makes Cybercom better at combating it. Synthesis is the pinnacle of knowledge. Ramirez 2017. Many scholars in the field of education agree that the ultimate goal of learning is the ability to apply new knowledge in different situations. Acquiring critical skills requires moving beyond simple factual recitation to transforming observations and knowledge into meaningful synthesis. Synthesis and evaluation are the 2 highest levels of learning in Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives. At this level, a student is moving to a second order of interference where diverse data coheres and a new understanding emerges. A student learns to integrate information and to develop insight. Thus, a student is able to synthesize the data in the form of meaningful recommendations. I am now open for cross-ex.
Cross-ex time, starting now.
Sure.
Alright, so in the simplest, in like layman's terms, what does your app actually do to combat these networks and combat the alt-right?
Sure. We kick as many KKK users, KKK members off the internet as possible.
Off the internet?
Yeah,
So like
pretty
similar
much.
to
It's
how we fought ISIS?
pretty much how we fought ISIS.
Yeah. Like how Cyber Command has fought ISIS in the past.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the actual alt-right itself, because that brings up an interesting question.
Yeah.
So what do you consider the alt-right?
The alt-right, we consider, well, in my speech, I use the alt-right and the ultra-right, and I combine them.
Okay.
And I say that they're the same thing, and we
Okay.
call them extremist groups.
Extremist groups meaning what? Do you mean the
The extremist groups are similar to the KKK, neo-Nazis, and other white nationalist movements.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on to your first impact and your advantage.
Sure, I believe that's Nazi hate.
Yes, the Bear 13 card.
Bear 13. Yes. Disrupting the ultra-right prevents radicalization.
Can you show me actually where the actual disruption itself brings down radicalization? Is the communication what's actually causing the radicalization, or outside factors of hate?
It's that, well, the communication is helping them become bigger. So taking down the internet makes them smaller.
Okay, explain this to me. How on earth will our actions not violate Pars Comitatus?
Not violate what?
Pars Comitatus, the statute that prevents the military from acting in a civilian in a civilian setting. How doesn't this violate that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, let me rephrase that. What allows Cyber Command to actually operate in the jurisdiction of a civilian capacity? What allows them to operate domestically?
Allows them to operate domestically?
Yeah, because your plan only states that the USFG should direct Cyber Command to conduct these operations, right?
Yeah,
Cyber
that is
Command
what the
part
plan
of the
text
military.
states.
So can the military enforce these kind of laws?
The military can operate within inside the United States, yes.
Where is that? Because that's not in your solvency. What allows them to do that?
Well, I don't state it specifically inside, but I know that they can.
You know that they can, so we should believe you over like every lawmaker. Cool. Let's move on to your second advantage. And specifically your impact here. You really think that destroying their methods of communication will alter their hatefulness at the core level?
Sure, yeah, because the easiest way for them to grow right now, as I've stated earlier, is to, well, the ideas that they spread, so the less people that they have in their group, the better. And as I said earlier...
Yeah, but to grow, does that reduce the current populations of alt-right extremists?
It will.
Oh, according to what? Oh, that's time. I'm going to take solid like 30 seconds of prep. Starting now. Alright, it should be there as Chico Ned. Stopping my time at 1 minute 15 seconds used. Alright. So,
let me just bring it up real quick.
as far as right, is it showing up for everybody? All right. As far as order goes, it'll be 3 off, then on. All right. Is my opponent ready?
Yes.
Is my judge ready? All right. Starting time. Now, T, increase interpretation. The 1AC must increase actions by cyber command that are part of existing operational roles. 1, increase must be of something that already exists. Buckley 6. The term increase should be construed to apply to increases of an already existing policy. 2, and cyber command is involved in defenses of cyberspace operations. Cycom is in charge of protecting DoD networks. Cyber command 18. Cybercom's actions are to defend the nation by identifying adversary activity, blocking attack, and maneuvering to defeat them, and defend the DoD information network, protect priority missions, and prepare cyber forces for national combat, provide analytic support. Violations 1, the app does not increase, they simply create a brand new operation. The app does not increase to be actions to protect DoD networks. 3, the app is extra-topical. They're trying to gain advantage from other non-resolutional mandates. My Prager 2002 card said it best. Our extra-topicality focuses on one advantage and argues that the plan goes too far beyond the resolution. 4, effect topical. They only gain topicality by passing the plan. It creates an operation that cannot be used as justification for an increase of action standards. 1, predictability. The resolution is the only stable indicator of what the negative should expect before the run begins. Keeping app cases resolutional is vital. There are only so many kinds of app under this revolution. And allowing the app to create an increase to make this topic unpredictable ground. Allowing the app to claim off-topic impacts with a negative disadvantage. It allows the app nearly infinite variety of impacts that cannot be reasonably expected to research. The action takes away net ground. This leaves the negative team at disadvantage. It can vote them down in competitive equity. Limits. We need good limits to make sure we have an educational debate that can only happen by limiting the debates to actions of increase, not creating. Voters. 1, rules of NFALD. Affirmative teams must be voted down if found to be atopical, which is why she reject reasonability. Allows for untopical apps to evade rules. Fairness education. Not having bare grounds and limits the debate makes it unfair to the negative. We always have shallow debate. This kills education because the negative can never have a position to run against Asian abusive team. On to the second theory position. Reserve rights. Clarify. Interpretation. 1, affirmative politics must contain topically mandated action. It should be sufficient to prove their propensity to solve on their own. For reasons prefer planted vacuum. Planted vacuum is the best standard when evaluating plan types. It checks to see if the app meets their burden and allows for a good standard of research and neg prep. B, predictability. Referencing external sources of the plan, including cross-examination, kills predictability. The app becomes a musing target as any card that matches the site reference cannot be used as solvency. It's not a stable source of the debate, as the app can always reference a different piece of evidence each round. Limits. Not having a full plan text exposed limits as become impossible to determine what a piece of evidence is being cited. Specifically, it justifies extra-topicality as the evidence can cite untopical actions that aren't actually clear in the 1AC ground. The AF skews our ground with the reserve right to clarify plans to make it impossible to generate DA links or test counterplane competition, because the AF can always use that as a way to get out of DA links to DAs and make counterplanes not competitive. Violations: the plan doesn't contain all topically mandated action. The plan does not prove the propensity to solve the farms, and reserving the right to clarify is a de facto admission of vagueness. The plan needs to be clarified later in the debate, then it actually doesn't prove a propensity to solve. Voters rule the reasons articulated above and the NFALD rules. Now, on to the first disadvantage, posse comitatus. 1. The military presence among civilians is on the rise, but is being restrained by posse comitatus Act. Galvin 18. Baggers arriving at the border will now see a sizable U.S. military presence. Their mission will be a largely support role. That's because military is bound by the posse comitatus Act, unless Congress specifically authorizes it. The military personnel cannot have direct contact with civilians, including immigrants. Next, using the military for domestic affairs, as highlighted in their plan text, is an increase of military authority. Benet 06. One military scholar sees the increasing domestic use of the military as a trend that could lay the groundwork for a military takeover of the United States. More law enforcement could work to elite militarization of our society. The Supreme Court has recognized that such a use of federal troops is antithetical to the values of the nation. Our history and tradition rebel. The thought of granting military power carries with it the authority over civilian affairs. Plan sets a precedent for acceptable military presence in a domestic setting, and this signals a Trump in favor of Trump authoritarianism and turns their case. Mistel 18. It is the very democratic principles that Trump abhors that make him think of using the military to enforce his policy goals with the point of a gun. He wants to use his powers as commander-in-chief to make it happen over their objection. This is how deposts start at a transition a civilian government to a military one. Breaking posse comitatus allows history to repeat itself and puts populations at significant risk of destruction and harassment, and this outweighs and turns the affirmative. During the Cold War, the military leadership showed appalling judgment about the kinds of activities that are carried out domestically. Between 1949 and 1969, the military conducted open air tests on biological agents 80 times using American civilians as guinea pigs. Edward J. Nevin died. General Creasy was unapologetic about his actions, noting that biological agents are designed to work against people. The point is to recall that U.S. military leaders' zeal for victory inspired actions that are dangerous to democratic institutions. It's that sort of zeal is a serious danger, and never more so than when the military is engaged in a struggle against an evil foe. Now on to on-case. 1. The AF has no solvency. The full-scale cyber operations that were actually led against Daesh, as clarified in their own cross-examination, it was actually happened in combination with actual kinetic forces and kinetic military personnel that specialized in that region. Lamotte 17. The U.S. military conducted cyber attacks against Islamic State for more than a year, and its record of success in those attacks coordinated with its elite special forces, such as that the Pentagon is likely to carry out similar operations with greater frequency, according to current former U.S. defense officials. When combined with traditional military operations, Thomas said, the cyber attacks culminated in the destruction of an adversary that is on an epic scale. He argued that the military can only achieve exquisite effects like this with a task force that combines a variety of capabilities, not solely cyber ones. Cyber Command learned through his campaign about ISIS how to integrate specialized capabilities with the broader military campaign. He noted, we do not anticipate the requirement diminishing now or in the future. Now onto their impact level and their advantages. So the AF specifically reads impacts that they can't claim. Because they can't outline how specifically this leads to de-radicalization, you have to hold them to what their actual cards say. So if you cross-apply all of their impact cards for their first and second advantage here, their specific impacts state that they don't actually de-radicalize. It's more just like the cutting communication markers has the potential to somehow lessen the load, and that these communication networks are only growing. Stopping growth and de-radicalization are not the same thing, and don't let my opponent come up here and make claims that aren't actually backed by evidence in this round. Hold him to what his cards say, and his cards specifically don't indicate that this will actually de-radicalize in any shape or form. All they state is that it could lessen the growth, and it could stop growth, but it doesn't actually claim that they're going to defeat these adversaries at their core level. These adversaries will still exist as de facto admission in their cross-examination. They have admitted that both of their impacts don't actually link to their own solvency. So this means, Judge, that you're going to vote on the negative because the negative has the only standing impact on this round because my opponent is textbook breaking posse comitatus. If my opponent comes up here and tries to state that they are somehow not breaking posse comitatus because the United States federal government may mandate this and may allow it, they still bite into my disadvantage, and it's a double bind because this proves that their plan is inherently vague because that wasn't included in the original plan text. Hold to what their plan text says, and their plan text specifically links so hard to the posse comitatus side. This outweighs and turns the AF, and we're going to get your ballot. Thank you. I'm not for cross-examination.
Okay. Starting time now. Can you please go over your reserve the right to clarify argument? I wasn't 100% sure where you were going with that.
Okay, pretty simple. So, in this debate round, all I ask is that you're held to what your plan text actually says. Your plan text should state what actions you're taking,
Right.
and if you have to state at the end of your plan text that you reserve a right to clarify, that admits that your plan itself and the actions you've indicated are inherently vague. So, allowing you to clarify in cross-text and allowing you to clarify these actions, even if you do clarify, the fact that you've had to and not actually included your answers to like clarification questions in that own plan text proves that your plan text isn't actually like meeting its burden of plan in a vacuum. It's not being when evaluated alone without any other, I guess, support. It doesn't actually hold water because you're not including all topically mandated action, and you don't prove a propensity to solve. Because it's a de facto omission of guilt.
Okay, thank you. And could you say what is posse comitatus an act that was passed, or?
Yes. So basically, the little bit of history lesson here, the Posse Comitatus Act was put into place after the Civil War, basically saying that the military can't be involved in domestic affairs unless specifically authorized by Congress. If we're going off the assumption that we're going to hold you to what your affirmative plan text actually says, you break the Posse Comitatus statute without congressional approval, and thus, because of that, and because even if you give them permission to break the Posse Comitatus statute, you're initiating a snowball effect. You're allowing the military to continue to perforate our affairs domestically, and doing so, that also leads to the very impacts that you're trying to avoid, the impacts of like silencing people, the impacts of lessening democratic institutions and whatnot. You're essentially like biting into your own very impacts by allowing a military force to have power and have say in our own law enforcement and to police people.
Let's see. Can you explain your second card on T increase? It's Cyber Command 18.
So my Cyber Command 18 just simply outlines the current roles of U.S. Cyber Command, which is to defend the nation by identifying adversary activity and working within the DoD information network. You operate outside of it, and you don't have any evidence of you operating inside of it. You're creating a new jurisdictional role, and that is outside of the context of the resolved, because you're not increasing action.
Okay. Okay, that's pretty much done. I'm gonna take some prep. Oh wait, no. I have 4 minutes. What am I doing?
Thank you.
Okay, stop prep. I have about 20 seconds left. I'm just gonna upload the file to the speech box drop. Okay, let's see. Okay. The order is going to be T on T increase, reserve the right to clarify, the DA, and then case. Okay, is anybody not ready?
Okay.
No? Okay. 6 minutes, right?
Yep.
Okay. Starting with T. No link to the topic. Their definition speaks to the interpretation of increase in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Their Supreme Court states SCOTUS 2007. The Fair Credit Reporting Act requires notice to a consumer subjected to adverse action based in a credit report. Adverse action is the denial of an increase of any insurance. 2. Their Supreme Court didn't buy their definition, neither should the judge. Increase can refer to creation. Their Supreme Court case says it best. Scouter 2007. The government constitutes an increase to reach a first-time rate. The government gives the example of a gas station owner who charges more than the posted price for gas to customers he doesn't like it. It makes sense to say that owner increases the price even if the driver never pulled in for the gas station before. The government's reading has the better fit. We therefore hold that the increase speaks to a disadvantageous rate even with no prior dealing. The term reaches initial rates for new applicants. Next, counter interpretation. 1. Increase includes creation. If I have 0 bananas and the negative gives me a banana, the number of bananas I have has increased from 0 bananas to 1 banana. OED, access November 2018. Increase to become greater as in size, amount, number, or intensity. On the violation, I meet the counter interpretation. Counter standards. 1. Predictability. My interpretation is more predictable because it aligns with how the Supreme Court actually ruled the case, and it aligns better with a common understanding of the term. 2. Ground. My definition provides more ground because it is not tied specifically to programs which already exist, thus allowing the negative more arguments. For example, it can run disadvantages related to staffing new programs that it otherwise wouldn't have had access to. 3. Real world. My definition is what was actually used in the Supreme Court, the case the negative cited, and so it meshes better with why the law understands the term and the way people use it in the real world. 4. Burden of proof. The burden of proof is vital to checking forces of oppression, which will use the flimsiest of justifications to screw people over, like Bush on WMD in Iraq. Lowering the burden of proof empowers Bush and similar oppressors to kill us all. On to the reserve the right to clarify. My opponent claims that reserving the right to clarify is a voter, and that means that I can kick out of anything, but that is simply not true. I simply reserved the right to clarify so I could clarify anything, any questions that you had in cross-ex about it. I simply wanted to be able to restate my plan text onto the DA. They say, we say, yeah, Cyber Command 2018. Adversaries continuously operate against us below the threshold of armed conflict. Our adversaries exploit our dependencies and vulnerabilities in cyberspace and use our system systems, processes, and values against us to weaken our democratic institutions. Cyberspace threats transcend geographic boundaries. Aggressive non-state actors damage our critical infrastructure as well as endanger American lives. These groups use cyberspace to promote their ideology, inspire followers, and control operations that threaten our allies and us. Organized criminal groups provide cover for states and terrorists, possess significant capabilities to steal data and disrupt government functions. Essentially, the Cyber Command actually can go with our plan. On to a case extension. The ultra-right murders people of color. Southern Poverty Law 2018. July 14th, 2018, Michonne Cooper is found dead. Kidwell's family describes the murderer as a white supremacist who draped himself in the Confederate flag and had a swastika tattoo on his arm. Kidwell claimed to be a member of the Ku Klux Klan and Aryan Nations. He's the true definition of evil. Most of my case arguments went uncontested. Therefore, you can extend all arguments that were made on case from the 1AC onto the flow. So those arguments will remain true for the rest of the debate. Next, on her solvency arguments, she said that the AF reads impacts that they can't claim. That is simply not true. You can go back and look at my solvency cards from the first speech. I will go back and I will cite the specific first solvency card that I read right now. That card was my Keen 2018 card, denying ultra-right extremist access to the internet is effective. Therefore, I can solve my impacts. Therefore, the affirmative does have solvency. I would like to extend the ultra-right murders people, Hanks and Amend 2018, and my link cards, disrupting extremist communication and recruitment networks works, Lamonth 2017. And I would also like to extend my internal link card, Internet is Key to Neo-Nazi Movement, CRS 2017. Essentially, if we take down and if we kick Klan members off of the internet, they will be able to. My plan will be able to solve. It is a try or die situation. Even if we can't solve 100% of everything that is out there, no affirmative can solve 100% of hate in the world. So, kicking some Nazis off of the internet is best, because therefore you get some of them off, and the more off, the better in speech.
I'll take a minute prep. I believe it was 3 minutes, 15 seconds remaining.
Something like that.
Okay. Starting time now. loaded as Chico 1 and R. And it's my time. Alright, as far as order goes, it will be just a second here. As far as order goes, it will be procedural of vagueness. And then it will be the DA, and then on case. Alright? So it'll be vagueness, then it will be the DA, and then on case. Is my opponent ready?
Yes.
Is my judge ready? Alright, I should probably be ready. Alright, let's start now. So let's actually talk about this vagueness DA and what it means for the context of the debate. So, extend my voters. The AF concedes that plan in a vacuum is the strongest burden of proof in this round. They say that the rules don't, that they say that they're gonna try to dismiss the rules in their next speech, and I'm gonna frontline that really quick and give you a reason why this procedural is the most important thing that you should be voting for in this round. So, if the rules truly hold no merit, then they wouldn't uphold things like, you know, their time. They wouldn't uphold their things like their prep time and their speech time ending at certain times. The reason why we should be voting on rules in this round specifically is because the rules are constitutive to the game. So nobody in this room is actually empowered to actually change the rules, and even if we agree that the rules are bad, allowing one person to arbitrarily break the rules is one of the worst things to do anything about it. A, voting AF doesn't actually change the bad rules, it just lets them cheat in the round. B, cheating is academic dishonesty, and if the AF is cheating and the judge votes them, the judge is voting too. C, this massively disadvantages the neg. I already have less time in one constructive speech. I could never predict whether the AF would actually cheat in this way. So when my opponent comes up here and tries to argue that we shouldn't be voting on the procedural, understand that it is your duty as a judge to vote if they break the rules, and they absolutely do. So, ignore the NFA 14 card. Constitutive rules, like the one stated, where they need to provide a plan text that has a propensity to solve, create the game. And the eliminations of these rules eliminates the game. Rules help us play the game effectively. Waddington 13. Some of the rules do not merely regulate, but they also create the very possibility of certain activities. Thus, the rules of chess do not regulate and existing activity. The rules of chess create the very possibility of playing. If you were to play chess and have no rules to chess, you wouldn't have a game of chess. You would just have a bunch of people playing with really weird looking figurines. Okay, so overview. Judge, you're going to evaluate this as you would a topicality. The rule states it's one of the affirmative burdens to provide a plan that has a propensity to solve. Extend our interp that the AF has to mandate topical action in a plan text that meets the solvency burden, and they don't meet this, and they admitted it. They completely concede the actual fact that they admitted it. So, plan in a vacuum is the best standard when evaluating plan text. This goes conceded. It checks to see if the AF meets their burden and allows a good standard of research prep. Any plan that uses as per or specifically states that we can clarify and cross-text is admitting that they're actually vague. On to limits. We're not having a full plan text extend my original articulation. Not having full plan text explodes as limits, as it becomes impossible to determine what piece of evidence is being cited specifically. It justifies extra topicality, as the evidence can cite untopical actions that aren't clear in the 1AC and clear in the plan text. It allows them to continue to actually justify in their actions. On to predictability. Referencing external sources, including cross-examination, kills predictability. The AF becomes a moving target of any card that matches the reference can be used as solvency. On to ground. The AF skews our ground because as per plans make it impossible to generate disadvantage links or test counterplan competition, because the AF can always say that the plan had no link or the counterplan is already in its AF. On to education. Our interp is the most real world. If a bill gets submitted to Congress and has bad wording, it doesn't get voted on. People critique the wording, and if a law gets passed with vague wording, it can lead to getting circumvented or even worse for negative consequences to occur. Answer to their cross-examination checks. Now, Judge, when they say that our cross-examination checks for abuse, and we gave you the opportunity to ask questions about it so we can restate our plan text, yeah, that's an admission of guilt. This was completely conceded in the first speech. So whether you like it or not, they actually are inherently vague, and you have to vote them down. Cross-examination is a de facto admission that your plan is vague. If you have to explain it after you've already stated it, it proves that you don't solve and you don't meet our interp. At best, it already checks grounds and every other standard. So I'm going to skip the reasonability. Let's actually go to the disadvantage. So, Judge, in their answers to my on-case positions, they also admitted that they trigger the disadvantage. So, let's look at their answers to the disadvantage first and why the disadvantage still holds ground. So, the disadvantage specifically states that when you allow the military to break the posse comitatus statute, it actually endorses Trump authoritarianism. I would like to believe that the AF doesn't actually want to endorse Trump authoritarianism and hatefulness that comes along with it. So, when the AF endorses Trump authoritarianism and bypasses and circumvents specific things that actually allow for people to be protected from military authoritarianism and from the military dominating in a civilian context, they're actually triggering the very impacts that they want to avoid. So, the turn on the AF absolutely outweighs in this circumstance. So, you're going to vote on the disadvantage. Extend my Bene 06 card, my Mistle 18 card, and my Helio 03 cards. They endorse the very ideology that they can't actually talk about, that they are trying to solve for the status quo. So this completely outweighs all impacts because it triggers the impacts of their own advantages in the first place. They don't give any reason that this doesn't trigger the impact. This completely goes conceded. The only argument they make is that they currently are under, that Cyber Command can fight adversaries, but they don't highlight why those adversaries that are in the civilians, that are in the United States, can actually be fought. So, finally, now that that's set, you're going to vote. That disadvantage proves that they don't actually solve, number one, because it can be cross-applied as a solvency argument, and two, it proves that there's a huge net negative to voting for the affirmative. Finally, onto my actual solvency argument. Judge, extend my original solvency arguments that went dropped. Again, refer back, cross-apply my rules good argument here. You have to vote on the rules. If they don't prove propensity to solve, they have completely dropped my solvency argument. By conceding the disadvantage, by conceding the solvency arguments, and by not actually addressing the vagueness of their plan text and admitting to a de facto admission of guilt of their plan vagueness, they lose on everywhere on the flow. Judge, it is your absolute duty to vote in the negative, because otherwise you'd be aiding and abetting and cheating of the affirmative and cheating this round out of its actual, out of its own institutions and its own constructs. So, thank you. Vote nay.
Okay, I have about 20 seconds. And come on. Okay, start that. No new cards.
What's the order?
It is going to be a little bit of case at the top, just very briefly. Then T increase, reserve right to clarify, DA, then an overview, and like a frame of the debate.
Alright, 3 minutes on the clock.
Okay. Is anybody not ready? Okay. Starting with case. I would like to extend all case arguments on the flow. I had a total of 2 impacts, or 2 advantages on the flow. Number 1 being they will Nazi hate, and number 2 being a fire hose of falsehoods, both in the Nazi hate ending the impact, the ultimate impact resulting in murder of minorities and people, and and people that the ultra-right do not like. And I would also like to extend the second impact, which was education, onto topicality. Actually, I'm going to go reserve right to clarify first. Okay, reserve right to clarify. I would like to first respond to my opponent's argument where they said I only have 1 constructive speech. I also only have 1 constructive speech, and mine is shorter. So They claim that I am simply cheating, but I would like to extend my first argument by saying I simply reserve the right to clarify so that anyone in the round who didn't understand it, I could simply restate it and be able to explain what it was. And then on T increase, I would like to extend my counter interpretation, which was that increase includes creation. If I have 0 bananas and the negative gives me 1 banana, the number of bananas I have has increased from 0 to 1. I would also like to remind the judge that their interpretation has absolutely no link to the topic, because their definition of increase goes against the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which went through the Supreme Court. So you have to completely ignore their definition of T in increase. So that means that I have won the topicality flow. Moving on to the DA. So I would like to point out my response that I read on the DA, my Cyber Command 2018 card. That card simply stated that Cyber Command was able to do domestic affairs. And now I would like to finish off my speech by giving a roll of the ballot and impact calc. Okay, so the roll of the ballot is for the team that best accesses its impacts. This is the affirmative, not just because I have more scenarios, but because these impacts are also greater. There are 2 scenarios in my case, while her DA only has 1. I have won the topicality flow, so you can completely ignore all of her arguments on that, and I'm not really sure why she keeps saying that I didn't respond to solvency, because I did, and I can extend those cards right now. The first one being, that's time. Okay.
Good debate.
Good debate. No memes.
I know, I couldn't. I'm sorry. Justin Flick was watching, I couldn't meme it. What? I just said I couldn't run the meme K.
say who's Chico.
Chico.
I should probably have in my jacket.
What was that?
This probably would help. Right back.
Almost there. Okay, so I voted for negative on something I didn't want to vote for. So here's my reading. Because I'm just a little hungover, so I'm just going to read my. This round comes down to the rebuttal speeches when R1 and R correctly isolates the DA as the winning argument. The 1AR was too underwhelming on the questions of the DA. However, the neg in the 1NR also doesn't really answer the one card that was right against the DA, which was that the DoD has done domestic affairs before. Compare answers. That's the one thing that's really lacking in this debate. You guys are like acting like the other person isn't saying an argument, right? So a formula to kind of put in your head is I said, they said, I win because, or they said, I win, I said, they said, I win because, right? Just kind of train your mind in that methodology. One, because it's very organized. It's organized for the judge. It's organized for you. It forces you and compels your mind to think about the comparing and contrasting arguments. And two, you're doing the work for the judge. If you're telling me why you win in that interaction, then I have to do less thinking and less bias about where I think about these arguments, right? So do that work for the judge. Make it organized like that. That'll solve a lot of what's happening in this debate. Ultimately, the negative wins on the clarify your answer argument because the 2AR simply doesn't really answer anything on the flow. I don't know why you're going for top cal. She doesn't go for top cal, right? The 2AR is a very hard speech, especially when the 1NR bifurcates its time like that. But you made it even harder by, bringing top Cali back in the debate. She dropped the T. There's no reason you're wasting time on the T. Your time should have been spent on the clarify your answer, which really is a very weird answer. I guess it's kind of a interesting discussion about what a plan text should be, but it's super mixing burdens, right? A plan text is just a plan text in the vacuum. She's saying that you kind of have a solvency burden now in your plan text. No, I don't. That's what solvency is for. My plan text just does something. I just choose a law, and then in solvency I explain what it solves. That's where it becomes explicit what the solvency is behind the plan text. And so you should, and your answers are fine to this, but you're not getting to it enough in 2AR. You're not in extending your standards. You're not challenging her standards. So she's just getting away with everything that I don't even agree with as a judge. But I can't really give you your 1AR answers when you're not doing anything to 2AR for them, right? In that sense, I guess she is correct where I would be complicit with cheating, which, by the way, is the first time I've ever said if I don't vote for someone, I'm complicit with cheating. That was an interesting statement. So yeah, I think that just kind of listening to your opponent and giving your opponents more credence is where you two can improve, and making sure that you are comparing and contrasting arguments. Because right now it's just two ships passing in the night, and then it's just the judge's preference. And then just being really strategic with your 2AR time distribution. That's what kind of hurt you here.
What did you think about my roll of the ballot?
Your roll of the ballot?
Yeah.
Where?
The back bit, which team best accesses its impacts?
It's fine. I mean, it's fine. What is your question about it?
Was it good?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's fine, right?
Okay.
That kind of already is the paradigm, implicitly.
Okay.
Implicitly in debate. I'm already going to be looking at that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was kind of going for the thing you were talking about earlier with like doing the judge's work for them. Like, this is what you're supposed to be voting on. The team that better accesses its impacts, and that's me, because
Yeah, but a judge is kind of already doing that, right? Like, I'm already kind of looking at your
Okay.
impacts. What I mean by like doing work for the judge is like, they said that if the DoD does this, that this will lead to like Trump going off and like attacking citizens now with alt-right like ideology. She has conceded my answer that the DoD has done domestic affairs before. I am winning this argument because her brain and her link has already been tested. You will prefer me because that shows I'm winning in probability that her link has already been tested. Nothing happened. I'm winning this argument for that very reason, right? Like, that is doing work for the judge. You are taking her argument, you are reminding me of your argument, and then you are telling me why your argument is better instead of re-extending your argument, right? Like, the difference between what I just said and what y'all did was extend my argument that the DoD has done this before. You see the difference?
yeah.
Like, yeah, but now the judge has to do work. Now I have to
Okay.
do the comparative analysis, whereas you should be doing that.
Okay.
So that way you get the win. But in this round, it was really time distribution. That was the time distribution to 2 AR.
Should I have just not gone for that vagueness?
Yeah, man, that was weird, dude.
I know.
That was a weird argument. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna go for. Honestly, I think you should have just gone for
The
the
DA.
DA because
Yeah.
the DA wasn't really answered at all in 1AR.
Yeah.
So I think you could have
Just gone there.
made arguments about why that's why we're on the brink and we're on the threshold and
Yeah.
blah 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 and stuff like that. But yeah, the DA wasn't really hit, so I thought that was kind of the winning strategy for you there. But
Just spend more time on that, less time on these really weird procedurals, I guess.
yeah, that's a really weird one.
Okay.
But I mean, yeah, it's a weird one.
What do you think of the frontlining?
What?
The frontlining with the complicit in academic dishonesty. Frontlining to passable like rules bad answers. Is that just a waste of time, Loki?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
I mean, there's some judges that will like love the topic of rules, but the way the debate community is now, it's so like homo and so like rules and laws and citizenship. These topics. Right? It's like there's no credence to like citizenship. That's such a gross word in the debate community. Not to me, but in the debate community.
Yeah.
So yes, when I'm judging it, I don't know. It's kind of like I told you, like when you asked me if it's like I'm going to vote on like an inherency like stock issue, right? Like, don't just assume that the judge is going to be like, oh yes, like rules are holy, it's biblical, we have to follow them.
Yeah.
Like, explain why that's important.
Explain why it's important.
Right,
Okay,
and
makes sense.
the reasons why that's explained is the reason why that's important is the reasons I already said, which is like, without rules, young debaters that are getting in the event like feel like they can't access it because it's just way too borderless. Then it's not fair to people. They end up exiting. It's just the generic like impacts the topicality. People exit the event, stuff like that. That's why rules are important. Rules aren't important because of rules. Rules are important because of the consequences that happen without rules.
Consequences.
So just contextualize the consequences as opposed to being like tautological with your understanding of rules.
Okay, I understand. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your
thank you.
feedback.